Hi, welcome to the New York Times Paywall case study presentation for Management 5900 conducted by Suzie, Carl, and Kristi. Here's an overview of our presentation. We will cover the history, the problem, provide a situational analysis which will include an external environment analysis, the Porter's 5 forces, competition, SWOT analysis, as well as internal analysis. And 3 possible strategies will be discussed, as well as a recommended strategy and answers to the case questions provided by the professor. The history of the New York Times. The New York Times Company was a leading global multimedia news and information company and operated the New York Times. The New York Times is a flagship daily newspaper of the company and was founded on September 18, 1851 by journalist and politician Henry Jarvis Raymond and former banker George Jones. And as print moved into the digital era, NewYorkTimes.com was founded in 1998. And in search of further revenue, a paywall subscription was implemented in 2011. The New York Times success. New York Times is a global leader in multimedia news. In 2011, New York Times saw revenue of $2.3 billion and an operating profit of $57 million. In 2011, the Sunday print subscribership was at 1.35 million, with weekday and Saturday print at 900,000 print subscriberships. New York Times' core purpose is to enhance society by creating, collecting, and distributing high-quality news, information, and entertainment. This was proving to be true for the New York Times. By 2011, the newspaper had won 106 Pulitzer Prizes, the most of any news organization. However, in spite of its prize-winning journalism, the Times was facing significant pressures. Its subscription and revenues had steadily declined over the years, causing a problem for the New York Times. The New York Times felt the pressure of a changing market when it came to how consumers obtain their news. The traditional format of a physical newspaper had been evolving, and the New York Times was struggling. Its advertising revenues in 2011 were down. And in spite of cost-cutting, the operating profit in 2011 was 76% less than the previous year. There were declining print subscriptions. The fixed costs associated with producing a paper, such as editorial staff, production, and distribution, have little room for making cutbacks to help improve the bottom line. They are considered fixed production costs. The digital age has also brought with it new opportunities as well as challenges for the newspaper industry. Websites that offer free postings such as Craigslist and Monster.com have replaced the need for classified and job hunting ads in the newspaper. Companies being able to have their own websites to self-promote their products have also replaced large corporate advertising in newspapers. And you can see from this ad that the news operating profit has had a steady decline, with a sharp decline to a loss in 2008, with a small spike but still declining, and nothing compared to what it was in 2002. As well as the news revenue, you can see this decline starting in 2006, with no sign of becoming more and more profitable. And as for expenses, you can see the same thing. However, when you get to 2010, you see an increase in expenses, almost meeting the news revenue point. Despite the struggles of the newspaper industry, there still remained a need for journalism and news accessibility by the general public. The digital technology has allowed a new way for newspapers to reach their readers by creating an online format. This convenient yet free form of obtaining news showed an increase in online traffic of readers, but was not supported by an equivalent increase in paid online advertising or revenue. And this is what brought about the idea of newspapers using a paywall in order to increase revenues. A paywall is a paid subscription that allows for full online access, otherwise the content available is restricted. The first attempt of a paywall by New York Times was in 1996. The New York Times website charged overseas users $35 per month for online access. However, they dismissed this first attempt after only 2 years due to what turned out to be a temporary increase in advertising income at the time. In 2005, the second Times paywall, called Times Select, was implemented. This stripped-down version only gave access to the content of well-known columnists for an annual fee of $49.95, while the remaining content remained free. College students and other select readers were offered a discount for the online subscription, while print subscribers had complete free access. Initially, Times Select saw steady growth in subscribership, reaching 227,000 subscribers. However, with the rise of social media, the practicality of the content provided for a paid subscription became debatable. Featured columnists were also unimpressed with the Times Select system, noting that it eliminated a large portion of their previous viewership. Times Select was then abandoned in 2007. After 2 previous failures and with new research on how to create a more successful paywall system, the New York Times made a third attempt in 2011. Before making a final decision on the format, there were 4 design options put forth that considered the amount of access provided, type of content, and type of medium to be included. The first option was the all or nothing option that only allowed online access to subscribers who received the print version. The second option was exclusive content. This would allow full access for free to everyone on standard news content, but restrict access to exclusive content to paid subscribers. Option 3 was a metered system. It would allow users to have free access to all content up to a specific number of articles or pages. Any additional content would require a paid online subscription. And the fourth option was device-specific. This would allow the Times to charge their readers based on the medium they chose to receive their news, such as the physical paper, the Times website, or a portable device. After careful consideration, the Times chose a combination of the metered system and device-specific approaches. Access was given to up to 20 articles a month without having to pay a fee. The New York Times homepage and all section front pages were free to all users at all times. This new paywall system was considered to have leaks based on the fact that some accommodations were made. Those who were directed to the site through search engines were given 5 articles per day over the normal 20 allowed. Those who visited the site through social media sites such as Facebook had no article limits. The Times justified their leaky paywall by citing that they were just generating additional revenue and creating social awareness of their online content, a marketing method. A promotion campaign was also started with Lincoln to provide free subscriptions to consistent users of the website until the end of 2011 in return for increased online advertising. And by February 2012, the Times paywall had 390,000 paying online subscribers, and 70% of print subscribers registered for online access, rendering this paywall a success. The question was, would this continue to last or continue to be successful? We will do a situation analysis to evaluate the external, the Porter's 5 forces, internal, and SWOT to see if this is something that can be sustained. As for the external analysis, we looked at political trends. And there are no government regulations in the United States because of freedom of expression, and there's no licensing requirements. For economical, the revenues and subscription had steadily declined, and the audience is not willing to pay for online subscriptions because of readily available information on the internet. Sociocultural. The people's perception of news has dramatically changed due to plagiarism scandals, false news, biased media, etc. And people prefer to simply browse through the internet or spend their time on social media. As for technological, the model of mass communication has changed, and the internet is substituting the prints. There are not just newspapers or journalists that are providing the news. There are various blogs, social media, and websites. And all of this information is readily available via iPad, computer, tablets, anything that is internet accessible. And now the Porter's 5 forces. Potential entrance in the online news industry is high because it does not require a large capital to enter the market. It's easy to spread news on social media, various websites, and blogs. It's also easy to create a following, maintain a website, and continuously make information readily available for the general population. As for the printed media side of the print industry, the potential entrance possibility is low. There are established competitors or big players in the market with a loyal customer base. It'll be hard to take from that. The profit margins are pretty thin, and the print industry is a dying business. As for bargaining power of suppliers, paper and ink suppliers for the printed media is moderate because there are a limited number of suppliers, low switching costs, and New York Times has market power. However, newspaper publishers depend on suppliers for raw materials. Therefore, the supplier's pricing can have a direct impact on the publisher's margins. Publishers like New York Times need to manage the bargaining power of their suppliers to maximize and protect their profit margins. In order to do this, New York Times can develop efficient supply chains with multiple suppliers to help keep costs low within supply chains and between suppliers who must compete with one another. Also, New York Times can experiment in using other materials to produce their product. This way they have options should a supplier's pricing become too high. The bargaining power of suppliers as to journalists is high because they are the key resources in providing better journalism and news, so they have more of the upper hand in the industry per se. The newspaper publishing industry has intense competition that drives down prices and affects the long-term profitability of a newspaper company such as New York Times. To survive in this highly competitive environment, the New York Times needs to constantly look for ways to differentiate itself from the competition. The New York Times needs to also look for ways to increase its economy of scale to help keep down costs and provide competitive pricing. The New York Times can also look at acquisitions and partnerships with its competitors to help increase the market size rather than competing within a small market. Its product differentiation and innovation is key. The threat of substitutes is high. Customers can use television, social media, blogs, the radio, and magazines to get the news and ads that they may be looking for. Alternative products and/or services that meet customers' needs in different ways can have a long-term impact on a publisher's profitability. New York Times can manage these threats by focusing on services rather than products, which are not as easy to substitute. The New York Times can also strive to not only meet the core needs of their customers but anticipate them. Lastly, the New York Times can look for ways to increase customer switching costs by keeping their costs lower than competitors, offering package deals and/or proprietary products and services. The bargaining power of buyers, also known as subscribers, in the print industry is high. It's high because there are various ways to obtain news, entertainment, and advertisements. And the switching costs are low, and they essentially control the advertisers and the print industry. And advertisers also have a high bargaining power because there are different methods of advertising, and there are many different platforms where they do not have to go with just the New York Times. The Wall Street Journal is the dominant competitor in the national newspaper industry and is one of the New York Times' main competitors. The Wall Street Journal is the largest newspaper in circulation in the United States that serves the English reading professionals, businessmen, and politicians. The Wall Street Journal is a dominant brand that is known for providing the best quality content. The aesthetics of its newspapers is significantly different from that of others, which helps it to stand out on a newsstand. However, the Wall Street Journal has opportunities for improvement in its online presence. It can look for strategic online partnerships with other websites to help reach more online customers. It can also look for new innovative ways to grab online customers' attentions. The Wall Street Journal can focus more of its marketing to reach and expand its online audience. This gives room for New York Times to gain leverage or competitive advantage by capitalizing on these opportunities. Now I'll go on to the SWOT analysis. The New York Times has strengths of really high quality journalism, as you could see in the many Pulitzer Prizes. They have a really strong online presence. They are the largest local metropolitan newspaper in circulation in the United States, and they have a strong brand loyalty. Some of their weaknesses are they have predominantly an older customer base of 65-plus-year-old readers. They have some recent plagiarism scandals that has caused people to question the integrity of the articles that are being published through the New York Times, which can take away from the customer base. And they have a really high subscription rates in comparison to their competitors. As for opportunities, entering strategic online partnerships with other websites or universities to reach more online customers is a great opportunity for New York Times, as well as launching large-scale online marketing strategies. Some threats are increased competition from other newspaper and websites and the extinction of print news, causing major losses in revenue for New York Times that need to be made up in other avenues. Internal analysis. The New York Times Company is a diversified media company whose core purpose is to enhance society by creating, collecting, and distributing high-quality news, information, and entertainment. It publishes 3 major daily newspapers, operates 8 network-affiliated TV stations, and 2 New York City radio stations. Moreover, in the mid to late 90s, the company joined 8 other newspaper companies to form the New Century Network, an online news service. It also created the New York Times Electronic Media Company to develop new products and methods of distribution. This was the beginning of an urgent race from the print world to the rapidly growing world of digital media. Despite continuing decline in circulation and because of its advertising revenue tied to its core print products with its diversification, the company has done better than most. However, much of the New York Times diversification was born out of common sense, such as business ventures that shored up the company's principles and products. There are several strategies that may resolve New York Times' dilemma of the internet and readily available news. First, New York Times can transition to all digital news, just shutting down print operations completely. Its print subscription revenues are large but declining year on year with major costs. By doing this, New York Times will eliminate costs of print and delivery, and give New York Times more capital and resources to focus on providing the best possible news on the internet. By pouring New York Times resources solely into the website and other avenues of news on the internet, New York Times can dominate the industry with the best journalism and for a cheaper price because there will be no tangible newspaper to print and deliver, which is not promising for New York Times. By providing high-quality journalistic content, customers looking for reliable news via internet will be drawn to New York Times website and be willing to pay a subscription rate. Another alternative strategy is implementing a utility model of subscription which is based on metered approach, also known as the pay-as-you-go approach. This subscription model allows subscribers to purchase access to content as portions. It allows for some viewing and news consumption without a continuous subscription or high cost to the reader, allowing New York Times to keep some control over the amount of free content. Because there are so many sources for customers to read the news from, the industry is high in price sensitivity. By providing free content and requiring payment as a customer continues to read, allows for online traffic and revenue. Furthermore, the more online traffic New York Times gets, the more advertisers will want their ads on the New York Times website, allowing for another source of revenue. This strategy may attract the maximum customers by providing free content and requiring payment as a customer continues reading at a reasonable rate. Another alternative strategy is to provide consumers with New York Time-ready devices. This is done by making arrangements with device manufacturers such as Apple and Microsoft and service providers such as AT&T to have an integrated application or widget with a subscription that will allow for automatic launch and provide customers with an easy-to-use method of reading the news. This allows for automatic launch and access, providing customers with an easy-to-use method of reading the news. This also provides an opportunity for advertising and promotions. Furthermore, having New York Times ready devices will help keep New York Times worldwide because people are buying Apple, Microsoft, AT&T, etc. services and products around the world. This eliminates customers having to pay per article and instant access. This will be the application provided to customers purchasing these goods, keeping the competitive advantage over other competitors. With any strategy, it is important for New York Times to differentiate from its competitors by providing unique benefits to media users. New York Times model, whatever it may be, will increase the profitability of media users choosing New York Times news versus others. In addition, cost leadership in any of the discussed alternative strategies is recommended. The strategy that will allow for differentiation and cost leadership the most effectively is what is recommended. In this case, it will be a combination of the three alternative strategies recently discussed, because there is a need for a cohesive, coherent strategy to increase revenues through alternate channels. First, New York Times needs to cut on costs and eliminate the print side of the newspaper company and transition its focus onto the online side. That is the new, now, present world. New York Times can appease print subscription customers by giving a deadline when the subscription will come to an end, offer free content for a period of time to make up for the lack of printed news, helping customers learn the website and to consume news in this manner. This is a great opportunity to capture a sizable portion of the market that has not transitioned to digital use yet, and most likely will eventually. As New York Times shifts to providing only news digitally, New York Times can entice customers by allowing a limited amount of articles to be read before requiring customers to pay per article. This will not require much from New York Times to implement, just making sure to monitor if online traffic actually ends up paying for further articles after reading the free content or leaving the website is important. Lastly, by partnering with companies and services like Apple to integrate New York Times applications on devices and services will be cost-effective and provide customers with a platform that is ready to use. By having one of these devices or services, the customer can be charged a small subscription that is cheaper than regular subscriptions. By having New York Times applications ready on devices and phone services, this addresses an important challenge of how to raise revenues through advertising and promotions, in addition to earned revenues through subscription. This will be the mainstay for the business. And when this strategy is implemented, the structure of the company will change. However, the energy will not be downsized, but refocused to a thriving method of news consumption. Question number 1. Is the paywall working? In 1996, the paywall was not successful. In 2005, the paywall was implemented again. However, it was abandoned in 2007. However, from these first 2 experiments, the New York Times then created what we discussed earlier, the leaky paywall. And this seemed to have monumental success in comparison to the other paywalls. In 2012, despite criticism, the New York Times reported increased online traffic and subscriptions in light of its leaky paywall approach. And online viewership was on the rise, and so were hopes of a more secure future. Now moving forward to 2018, the paywall system is alive and well with all major newspaper publishers using a similar approach. In general, yes, the paywall system does seem like a good strategy for newspapers companies to make a profit in the online environment with the ever-growing use of smartphones and obtaining information via internet. The incorporation of a paywall system is not only a good strategy, but a vital one for the survival of the company. This allows them to cover their costs and make a profit for a provided service, which is what they are in the business to do. Otherwise, the revenues of newspaper companies will continue to decline with the decline of printed newspapers and eventually become extinct. So the paywall system is a method that is needed for this industry. The New York Times continues to be a dominant player in the newspaper industry. However, technological advancements in media distribution continue to be causes for constant change in order to keep revenues flowing. The implementation of the paywall system has helped to create a new form of income. Concern persists for what lies ahead for the newspaper industry as a whole, as readership continues to decline and the reality of printed versions becoming extinct looms in the near future. The New York Times paywall may have provided hope for a successful future in a digital world, but only time will tell if it will be enough. With the implementation of a combination of the recommended strategies, New York Times can cut costs, increase online traffic, which increases revenues from both advertisers and readers, which will allow New York Times to focus on providing excellent and reliable journalism via the internet. Thank you for taking the time to view our presentation of the case study. We look forward to hearing your comments and feedback. Have a great weekend. Thank you.